I know that most of us are aware of the history of God's dealings with man from the Garden of Eden forward. And that though it was not written down, when God made certain statements to Adam and to Eve, they were matters of law. They were matters of authority. And then the time came that God saw fit to establish a written commandment. When Moses went up into Mount Sinai and was there received the Ten Commandments, we have written for us one of the basic standards of what God would have us to do in our lives or with our lives. And yet, when Moses came down from the mountain, he saw that God's people were worshiping, but they were worshiping in the wrong manner. As a result of that, the literal commandments were broken. And Moses went back up in the mountain and received another writing of the law. Come forward to the time in which we live, that God has given us a written law. But that law is to be written upon our hearts. When Moses, before the congregation of Israel, read to them the commandments, not just the 10 as we call them, there were other commandments as well. But that in the relationship that God intended for his people to have, they fell upon two areas. In Exodus chapter 20, we have one of the places where God has specified those 10 commandments that he gave through Moses. In those 10 commandments initially given, the first 4 commandments dealt with God's relationship to man. Specifically pointed out the subjection that man must have to God and to God's laws. The 6 remaining commandments dealt with man's relationship to man. Someone has said that the main problem that we have in this age living up to that is that God put humanity in that spiritual sense. And here we have in the 10 Commandments a specific law or laws that were given for man to be obedient to. The 10 Commandments, save one, was transferred under the new covenant. That we're just as responsible to those laws that God gave then as we are now. The one, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, was annulled. When Christ gave his life upon the cross, the new covenant came into existence. Then that law was done away with. And no longer is it the Sabbath day that we observe, but it is the Lord's day, the first day of the week. Someone has said that if you take the Ten Commandments and you take the Sermon on the Mount, you have provided for you the essence of man's responsibility toward God, with the initial responsibility being to God. It is interesting in the Old Testament, well, the New Testament as well, that many did not take into account that they were responsible to God. That when you come right down to it, every disobedience was against God. And yet God, through his word to us, this book that we call the Bible, provides for us that standard. Many years ago in a class that I taught at Mars Hill Bible School, and I came across this information some time ago. But I asked the students in that class to write down the 10 commandments of life. There's a close relationship